mycelium right here. And the mycelium is breaking down agar. Mycelium is a genetic clone of the mushroom. So a mushroom farmer can actually use either mycelium to expand the mycelium, or they can actually use a physical mushroom to expand the mycelium. There's another one right there. So we talked about mushrooms. They come in every shape and size. Is this a mushroom?
No.
Yes. Kinda. This is a scalarita of a mushroom, mycelium. This is chaga, and it grows on our birch trees in our eastern forest. It is, by some, considered to be a parasite to the tree. There's some folks also arguing that this isn't an actual parasite, that it's actually a saprophyte that has parasitical properties, but it's not a true parasite. But I think it's a true parasite, because every tree that I ever see this chaga growing on generally is going to be dead pretty soon. And this mushroom scalarita can grow to be in excess of 40 to 60 pounds. And they will live on birch trees that obviously have somewhat weakened immune system, because every plant, because it has antifungal properties. Because if it didn't, every plant would be consumed and eaten by a mycelium. That's how pervasive mushroom mycelia is, and how mushroom spores are. We're constantly breathing in mushroom spores. They are everywhere. They're so small that you couldn't even see them. So we have actually developed antifungal properties as well to our bodies, because otherwise we'd be essentially eaten by the mushroom as well. But in the mushroom kingdom, there's basically 3 different families of said mushrooms, or really myceliums. And this is a parasitical mushroom, and parasites will actually eventually, a true parasite will actually eventually kill its host. And this chaga generally eventually kills its host. Chaga has all sorts of interesting properties. It actually has vasodilating properties, so it actually will help your lungs to expand. Has polysaccharides, omega-3s, and it has a whole host of other minerals and enzymes that actually can help fight cancer in the body, can actually be an amazing way to keep bugs away, and will actually give you the ability to carry flame or start a fire. I have a little thing that I've been burning here. You guys can pass this around, and you can actually feel how hot this is. This is burning chaga. You can actually feel, this took 1 strike of my lighter to light this thing.
Yeah.
So you can imagine being a nomad going out collecting wood in the fire and then blowing on something for hours trying to get it to start. But if you can create a small ember and just put it on a dried mushroom, it's like the best fire starter there is. And once you get a fire going, you can actually capture an ember, and you can put it on a physical mushroom like this artist conch, or the birch polypore, or the black hoof fungus, and actually carry the ember from one place to the next. Imagine the value of that being a nomad when you're trying to bring fire somewhere, and you actually had this little tuft of mushroom fabric that could actually carry an ember from one spot to the next. And that goes into the realm of mushroom paper.
Yeah.
Mycelia can be pummeled and turned into a paper-like or felt-like substrate, and this oftentimes would be how the individual nomadic people would actually carry mycelia as well. They would actually grind it up and actually make like papers or poultices that could be used for, say, wounds, dressings, any sort of ability to actually heal a bone or something like that. mycelium. Mycelium. So, we have parasites. Now these parasites in some cases are not good for the tree but in some cases are really good for you and me. Has anyone heard of the chicken of the woods?
Delicious.
Yeah, we had some of that today. That is considered to be a parasite as well. Not good for trees, but really tasty. Just you can see, look at that smolder. Isn't it cool? It's amazing. And on Earth, we obviously need parasites. We need things to actually bring the plants down that aren't doing very well. Parasites are not something that I generally make a lot of inoculum for. They seem to be something that does very well in nature. And I have had a number of people actually ask me to make mushroom parasitical mycelium for them, but I oftentimes just say, go core a tree that actually has this mushroom spawn as part of it, and it's really pretty easy to actually expand the parasite that way. And then we move on from parasites to, say, saprophytes. Here's a nice little saprophyte right here. This is the lion's mane. The lion's mane in nature is often found on beech trees and on alders in the Pacific Northwest. This is a wonderful mushroom. To most people, they have no idea that this is a mushroom. They don't know what it is. They think it might be an alien or something. But this is a toothed mushroom, and it has little teeth that come down. And over time, it starts to form this fluffy, little, white substance, which eventually is the mushroom spore. And in the case with the lion's mane lets the mycelium grow through. It bundles on the back side, which is a great example. You'll be able to see it. In the tree, the bundling takes place underneath the bark or in the back of the wood, and then the mushroom comes forth, and the wind broadcasts it into the forest. Mycelium and mushrooms are truly creatures of limits and limitations of its nutrient load. Mycelium does not need to fruit unless it feels like it is limited by its nutrients that it can uptake. So mycelium that invades a giant pile of wood chips or a big tree might take a long time to actually fruit out a physical growing mushroom because it doesn't need to. The mycelium only throws it out when it feels taxed. It feels in danger. So that's why a mushroom farmer has best luck with trying to grow saprophytical mushrooms, because saprophytes can actually be trained to grow into the medium of our potential desire, as long as we put it into something that it actually likes to eat. So in this example, I'm growing lion's mane on hardwood, sawdust, and wood chips right here. And I actually, in this case, put them in these little sterilizable bags, and then when I see bundling take place, I actually make a little X in the bag, and the mycelium will bundle and form a fruiting body. In a case like this one, like I said, this is a toothed mushroom instead of a pored mushroom, instead of a gilled mushroom. So it has teeth. Yeah. That is the lion's mane. The saprophytes are really great for breaking down logs, stumps, wood chips, or any sort of ligneous matter that actually can come down from forest types. And the saprophytes are the easiest to grow because they are the engine of the mushroom world. They are the most powerful decomposer. There are more mycelium that actually breaks things physically down of the saprophytes than anything else. They're like the first engine of the mushroom world for breaking things down. They are not harmonious. If something falls down or is on its way to being down on the ground, it will be one of those things that will help to usher its death and demise. And so a mushroom farmer oftentimes grows, say, mushrooms on, say, oak logs, shiitakes. That's a great example of what you actually would like to inoculate. Now, if I'm going to actually, say, inoculate a log or in a stump, and I go out to the forest and I just grab any tree willy-nilly and cut it down and use it, do I want to actually find a tree that might be old and downed and might not look so good? No? Why not?
It's probably already inoculated or something.
That's right. In our eastern forest, there are like 3,500 different species of mushrooms, and they're always finding new species. And at any time of the year, even in the wintertime, there's mushroom spores. People say, well, don't mushrooms die in the winter? Well, no. They just slow down, just like insects. I mean, you get insects coming back every year. You get frogs coming back oftentimes. So mycelia just slows down in the wintertime. And there's actually cold weather species of mushrooms that will fruit all throughout the wintertime. There's the bluet mushrooms that actually doesn't even like the fruit unless temperatures are like 38 to 42 degrees. There's mushrooms that actually come out in the middle of the wintertime. We have little tiny spikes of temperatures that come up. There's a mushroom called the inoculation mushroom. The inoculation mushroom loves kind of cold temperatures. So these are all different seasons. You can inoculate mycelium any time of the year. And a lot of people tell folks don't inoculate logs in the wintertime. But I actually think winter is an absolutely wonderful time to inoculate. Because there's not a lot of microorganisms being found in winter. And there's also not a lot of mushroom spores being broadcast. But yet there still are. Because there are annual and perennial mushrooms. And something like the chaga, if it has mushroom spores on it throughout the wintertime, it's going to continue to throw its mushroom spores out into the air. So there's plenty of opportunity for mushroom spores to actually happen. And this is actually a great example of a reishi that actually has mushroom spores on top of it. And there was, a lot of times reishi are stacked on top of reishi, and this was one that completely got showered by mushroom spores, and I went and dried it really fast. So I kind of fused the mushroom spores to the top of this reishi. So we talked about parasites that actually will go in and go after a living organism and actually bring it down and kill it. Another parasite would be the cordyceps mushroom. The cordyceps mushroom actually parasitizes insects and actually eats the insect, and then from the insect itself, a physical mushroom actually grows. So we have parasites that actually bring things down, saprophytes that actually work to bring things down once they're coming down or are down, and then there are mycorrhizal species. And mycorrhizal species actually form endo and ecto mycorrhizal relationships with said plants. Like example, when I went to go use the little boys' room out in the woods, I found some nice little lady slippers. Now lady slippers actually have endo and ecto mycorrhizal relationships with physical plants. And actually orchids don't exist without that naturally occurring mycorrhizal relationship that happens. And it is said that on Earth, there are so many mycorrhizals that every plant physically, if found in the wild, actually has a mycorrhizal mycelia that's attached to it. And it has actually been recently found out that up to the case of 60% of all plants actually garner no nutrients unless they actually have mycelias in the ground to actually provide enzymes and acids to actually break stuff down so that they can then uptake that nutrient load into their said plant body, which is really pretty cool. So we're really not Earth, we're a mushroom world. They're everywhere. They're really our friends, might be responsible for us being here, and have been used throughout history for food, for fire starters, for medicines, for spiritual vision quests, and now we're actually going beyond, and we're using mushrooms to create clothing, we're helping restoration, healing properties with teas and tinctures, and so who knows what mushrooms are going to be used in maybe they'll power our next vehicle somehow. Who knows? They'll be like blasting mushroom engines that can take us to space. The world conspires to create opportunities, and kind of everything's here for us to try to figure out how to make it one with us. And the mushroom teaches us, for example, how to become a great soil maker. Humans are great soil takers, but we're not really great soil makers. But we seem to be getting a little better at it. You know, it's like every tertiary treatment plant out there shouldn't be flooding all this our waste products with water. We should be building giant hugelkultur piles or wood chip piles with mycelium and feces and making soil. You know, instead we're sending the Phoenix pipeline off the coast of Boston mixed 50-50 with water and sewer off into this 2,000-foot trench where I bet some real healthy stuff's going on in the ocean there. So we've got parasites, saprophytes, and the mycorrhizals are the most prized. They're the most prized because they have a very unique environment with particular bacteria, particular molds, yeasts, plant types, and these are the things that people have had a really tough time figuring out how to actually physically grow the mushrooms. And the mycorrhizals would be, say, the chanterelle family, the boletus family, russulas, lactariuses. There's also a scolerata called the truffle. And the truffle is a native mycelial mass that actually is formed underneath pin pines, pin oaks, hazelnuts, and a series of other specific conifers. And these truffles are scolaritas, and these scolaritas are bundling of mycelia that eventually form a physical mushroom, though the mushroom may not look like what anyone would think a mushroom would look like. And those oftentimes are the most prized of all mushrooms, the scolaritas of the truffle. And the truffles fetch anywhere from $200 a pound to about $1,900 a pound for the white alba truffle of, say, Italy and France. Very, very rare, and a physical truffle of this size could be a 40-year-old truffle. So you think to yourself, well, if people are garnering truffles from the ground that are this big, and everyone's getting 20, 40-year-old truffles, well, there's not going to be a lot left. So there seems to be this whole movement of actually people starting to try to inoculate new stands of trees with spore bath inoculum to actually try to get the scolarita of the truffle to actually form. Well, how do we actually take mycelium and how do we expand it? How do we get it to be mycorrhizal in our behalf? How do we get it to be parasitical or saprophytical so that we can actually use it to actually grow physical mushrooms that we might be able to sell to a market and or just capture mycelium to actually put into our gardens. So we have a relationship going on with a constant source of nutrients that we can bring in to actually help make our garden a healthier, stronger place. Well, because mushrooms have the unique ability to actually physically throw out their spores, we can do something called the spore bath inoculum. And the spore bath inoculum is simple as taking a said bucket of water. This is sand, but we're going to pretend it's a bucket of water. Okay? So we have a bucket of water. Okay? We take 2 cups of molasses, old bunk maple syrup, maybe some burnt or some honey that the comb wasn't all left out of. Maybe we've got some old taro syrup or even some plain old raw white sugar. Throw like a cup or 2 in this 5-gallon bucket and have a little pinch of salt. Pinch of salt helps to retard the initial anaerobic respiration that can take place with those sugars. So I physically then can take a mushroom, throw it in the bucket, and because mushrooms like sugars, this environment will be suitable for mushroom spores to be broadcast in from this physical mushroom that now is in this bucket of water and now thinks that it's in an emergency because its time is done, so it's going to do its whole purpose, and that's throw out its mushroom spores. We could take these spores then and let them sit in this bucket of love. It's like mushroom love bucket. Love juice, mushroom love juice. We can take it and we can let it sit there for 12, 24 hours. And then after that time frame, we think to ourselves, well, what type of mushroom is this? Is this a parasite? Is it a saprophyte? Is it a mycorrhizal? Where do I want to put this? Well, say I have oyster mushrooms here. And I know that the elm oyster, which this mushroom is a saprophyte that actually has mycorrhizal properties. So it actually forms a positive relationship with plants, where not all oyster mushrooms do. Some oyster mushrooms will actually help to retard plant growth, but this elm oyster actually is said to kind of have a good relationship with said mushroom growth and plant growth together. So we could then take this and we could just broadcast it out in our garden. Maybe we don't care that we get physical fruity mushrooms. Maybe we're just looking to encourage mycelial growth so we can get things to break down. But maybe we want to get mushrooms. So I could actually broadcast this onto a couple of old bales of, well, they should be relatively new, bales of straw, coffee grounds. Maybe I want to grow some mushrooms on some stumps or some logs. I could actually broadcast this onto some logs and or stumps. And with any luck, if the combinations of things come together at the right time, and we don't throw it out in the middle of a rainstorm, this mushroom spore mass will actually land, will asexually divide on this new nutrient load, and we'll get the mycelium spreading throughout the substrate, and we'll get physical popping mushrooms, which is really pretty cool. Now say we have some chanterelle mushrooms. Well, chanterelles, I would not want to put on, say, logs, because they form a mycorrhizal relationship with plants. So I'd either want to put it out into an oak, beech, hemlock forest. I could make a bed of wood chips and then broadcast it out onto there, see if it takes. I could just broadcast it out into the woods, or I could do a little experiment and actually just see if I could get chanterelles growing in my garden. Might work, it might not work. The worst thing you do is you inoculate a garden with something that's mycorrhizal. You may not get physical mushrooms, but you get the mycelia breaking things down, which is really good for your plants. On the other side, I might get lucky, as I have with a bunch of people with morel mushrooms in their gardens. In their spring, before their plants even start going, they get morels popping up in their sheet mulching aisles, which is really another pretty cool way to do it. So we think that since all plants on Earth have a naturally occurring mycorrhizal relationship with a plant, every time we're gardening, we're also growing mushrooms too. So we need to understand how to actually do what the forest does and bring up its nutrient load into its canopy and then release, and then it falls to the ground, and the forest eats it, regenerates it, and gives it back to the plants through uptake to make new soils, which is really what we're kind of vying to do as gardeners. Is we want to make new soils, fresh soils, healthy soils, so that we can actually grow foods to eat that are healthy and are not filled with chemical fertilizers and other things. Because on Earth, that's not how the natural cycle of life really goes. You don't have a big fertilizing fairy up in the field throwing out 1025 or something, you know? You have the regeneration of soils from plants coming down and breaking down and bringing up nutrients into its soil types and in its nutrient load cycle so that it comes and brings about nice healthy soils. So, we have the spore bath inoculation method. And we also have something as simple as, say, taking fresh mushrooms and putting them in burlap bags in trees. They could actually be up in the trees and just allow the wind to just broadcast the spores around them. We're not quite necessarily know if we'll have success with this or not, because they may get broadcast into the neighbor's field, and we wouldn't necessarily know that we had success there or not. But then you may look down someday and see a bunch of king boletes growing right underneath your bag, where you actually were trying to broadcast. So these are considered to be the laissez-faire, the benign neglect methods of trying to inoculate. I'm more playing with the spores, trying to see if I can get them to work in my favor. It can be successful. It doesn't always lead to great success. But this was kind of like the original way how people probably experienced trying to grow mushrooms. It was by mistake. A mushroom fell in a bucket, and someone came out one day and they were just like threw it out into the woods, and then a year came by and they were like, wow, there was that same mushroom growing that I put in the bucket over there. Well, let's try it with something else. Had to have been a mistake. They also found people leaning logs against logs where particular mushrooms were growing. And again, the mushroom would be growing on a log, and it would be leaning against another log, and that log, the spores went to that log, and then that next generation of mushroom came along. Well, back a few years ago, there was actually people who discovered that you could actually train mycelium to grow on substrate that you physically want to. So you can actually take, let's see if I've got something right here. You can actually take a physical mushroom and take its spores and put it onto things. And cardboard seems to be an amazing means of actually spreading mushroom mycelium. And you can see, look at this. These are filled with mushroom maggots. Yeah? So these little maggots crawl throughout the mushroom and actually carry the spores with them. But in the very bottom of this, we have some little sporulation going on, and you can see the purple mass that's underneath that mushroom, and that is actually mushroom spores. We could actually do stuff like physically putting mushroom spores on cardboard, letting the mycelium eat the cardboard, and then we could actually take the mycelium and actually on the cardboard and just put it outside in our forest. And by putting a fresh substrate on it, the mycelium will navigate through the cardboard, but will also navigate on to, say, wood chips, straw, or other mediums that are set out there. So, basically the two varied ways that mushroom farmers try to expand the mycelium is either by taking mushroom spores and by making a spore bath mushroom inoculum in a laboratory, and or they actually take mushroom spores and scrape them onto a petri dish of, say, agar, and be able to use that agar as a starter to actually begin creating more mycelium. You use mushroom spores, or you actually use a physical mushroom. And because a mushroom is a genetic clone of the mycelium, or the other way around as well, you can actually physically take a said mushroom, go to the very center of it that isn't attached to the outside world that is actually breathing in bacteria, molds, and other things. Because it's a pure genetic clone of itself, if you have a nice fresh mushroom, you could actually take a little tiny piece of it, as small as that, put it on an agar petri dish, and in the right conditions, create like 1 million pounds of mushroom. Because a mushroom can be exponentially expanded by itself, by its mycelium. So you can actually take the mushroom and create 1 petri dish of mycelia. 1 petri dish of mycelium, well grown out, could make 10 more petri dishes of mycelia. And from 10 more, we could do 100. From 100, we could do 1,000. From 1,000, we could do 100,000. From 100,000, we could do 1 million. So we could actually take this mycelium and actually use it to be an eater of other things. So I say an eater, well, I'm talking about in the case of straw, wood chips, trees, just plain old compost. So a mushroom farmer takes the physical mushroom. There's another kind of little bucket here. Takes the physical mushroom, grows it out on agar, or takes the spore bath inoculum. And in this case, I'm actually growing it on the remnants of, say, wood chips. It's going to be a hard one to pass around. But I have these little grains here. And these are rye berries. Okay? And rye is an excellent means of being able to expand the mycelium as like a starter culture. And this grain is like my starter that I use to inoculate almost every avenue of mushroom farming material. Grain is great for a mushroom farmer to inoculate plugs, wood chip, straw, coffee grounds, other mediums like that, but it's not a great medium to go in directly outside in mass quantities of. What happens to nice fresh grain when we put it outside in the wintertime? Get eaten by birds. we get nice fresh grain, we put it outside in the ground, it gets eaten by birds, insects, and other stuff. So grain is really good for starting mycelium, growing out on different substrates, but it's not good to go outside. And here's some pieces of mycelial grain that you can see. So I take the grain then, and I either inoculate, say, these are mushroom plugs. Now you can't even tell there's mushroom plugs in there. But you turn it around, and you see there's mushroom plugs all in there. And I use these plugs to, say, inoculate wood chips. I use them to inoculate logs. I can use them to inoculate stumps. I could even inoculate straw with these plugs. And we like to use hardwood plugs. And these hardwood plugs have these little spiral grooves in them. And the mycelia will actually grow into the groove. And then when we put the mushroom plug in a tree, the mycelia just lets go, goes into the wood, and then starts to break it down. Growing mushrooms on logs and or trees is a little bit like growing asparagus or a crop that we don't expect to get a big crop that particular year. A fresh log has a lot of lignous matter that is compact and stored and was just before you cut it a true living organism that took 20, 40, 60, 100, 2,000 years to grow. So it's got a lot of stored nutrients that is cellularly very dense. A log takes longer to fruit, but grows mushrooms much longer than any other medium. But you have to be a little patient. It's not I'm going to have mushrooms in a month and a half. We're going to do that today with the oyster mushrooms. If you want fast mushrooms, the best way to grow mushrooms is, say, on a block of wood chips. This is a king oyster growing on a block of wood chips right here. This started forming mushrooms after about a month and a half of inoculation. This is hardwood sawdust wood chips that has been chipped. And I get mine from a cordwood processing facility. And I like to use hardwoods. Hardwoods are the best wood chips and logs to use because they don't have as many tannins than, say, the gymnosperms or the pine cone-bearing trees do. There's more species of poisonous mushrooms that are found underneath and within the hemlock, pine, spruce, fir forest than there are, say, the hardwood forests. Pines have a lot more tannins, like I said, and are not as good for human consumption. The hardwoods are the best. And some would say we actually have some of the best hardwood growing conditions in all the world here in New England because we do have a lot of hardwoods in our deciduous forests. And hardwoods are actually really good for your gardens as well. Pinus can sometimes be a little bit harsh on your gardens. Pinus are really good for, say, rhododendrons and blueberries and other acid-loving materials, but they're not always great for your physical gardens. If you're going to use some pine in your garden, it's really good that you actually use a mycelium to help speed down the breakdown so you don't get acidic burning of your soils taking place. And there's a whole means out there of economy based upon mulching with bark mulches. But you realize that just about every bulk mulch you see from facilities is all a very uniform color? Do you know how it gets to be that uniform color? Dyes. Chemicals. It's generally not that color. I mean, you'll see redwood chips. It's not redwood chips. It's usually hemlock that's dyed red to make it look like redwood. Sometimes, probably in the Pacific Northwest, you might find some redwood chips and or mulches. But, wouldn't always be best for your gardens. So, when actually trying to use mulching agents in our gardens, it's actually good to use a mixed assortment of colors, which would be most woods. It's not going to be all one uniform color. It's going to be, the color of the beech and the ash and the oak and all those other types of woods kind of brought together. And by adding that mycelia, it actually will speed up the decomposition of that hardwood material that can be broken down and then really available as nutrients for your plants. And you don't have to just use, say, wood. You can use chipped up corn stalks. You can use leaf matter. You can use straw. You can use hay. You can use coffee grounds. Pretty much anything that's an agricultural waste product, you can use as a mycelial soil to actually help to break down and bring in another nutrient load to your garden that might be able to essentially be used by something in your direct environment, as opposed to having to ship something from thousands and thousands of miles away, like fertilizers, chemicals, and other things to nutrify your garden. So we're kind of growing mushrooms is a little bit more like the forest ecosystem in your garden, trying to get an ecosystem to establish itself so that you can grow mushrooms and plants continuously from one year to the next and continue to build your healthy soils. So we've got parasites, saprophytes, mycorrhizals. We've got the ability to go from the mushroom to a bucket of spore inoculation. We've got the mushroom that we can actually put up in the trees and actually let the spores spread out onto our gardens or our forests. Or in the case of someone who's actually trying to make a little bit of extra income from growing mushrooms, we can actually buy spawn from someone like myself, or we can actually create the environment and actually start multiplying the mycelium of said particular substrates using myceliums to expand into other avenues. So for example, today we're going to be doing a straw inoculation. And these guys chopped up a bunch of straw. And straw is really one of the easiest and one of the fastest way to actually get mushrooms to grow quite quickly. So how do we inoculate straw? So I think this is a good time we can all stand and stretch. And we can actually make our way outside because I see my batch of straw is boiling. But my specialty is in making soil, helping your plants, helping your body, not feeding your mind. I think it's up to you guys to feed your own mind. So what do we have here? We have a 55-gallon drum that we have brought to a boil. Okay. So this is a pasteurization unit. Straw is something that can actually be pasteurized. A lot of mushroom farmers that actually grow mushrooms on, say, wood chips actually have to sterilize. Wood chips actually have a little bit higher concentration of bacteria and mold within them because they're actually grown in the forest. And the cellular density is very complex. It's a lot more complex than the cellular structure of, say, straw. Straw can be pasteurized for virtually 45 minutes and can be then used as an inoculation source to grow physical mushrooms from. And one of the best mushrooms to actually grow on straw is the oyster mushroom. And this is a blue oyster mushroom spawn right here. And this is grown out on wood chip spawn. And we're actually going to use this after after the water has pasteurized the straw to inoculate said straw. So it's always nice to have a nice clean water source. If you live in town and there's a little bit of bleach in your water, that's not a big deal. It will actually probably help to kill some of the microorganisms as well. I like to use, say, a cup or two of lime. Lime helps to retard some of the microorganisms that can be found in water that can be brought to a boil. So it actually will help to slow down anaerobic respiration, will help to be a little bit of a source of nutrients for the mycelium, but will also help retard the growth of the things that are found in anaerobic respiration. So I take the lime, I put it in, right there. I give it a little stir. See if I can find a stick or something. Oh, he's got the king of the sticks?
He got it. Oh, he's got it.
Excellent. Like it.
Bubble, bubble, boil in trouble.
No, we're just pasteurizing. There's no witchcraft involved, even though I am a Wichland. But it's not spelled with a T. It's a C.
Do you add some extra nutrients?
You know, there are people that add nutrients in it, sugars, but those are not generally used in pasteurization. The problem with those extra nutrients is that those extra nutrients then can become anaerobic. And they oftentimes can lead to infestation of molds and bacteria. So most amendments are generally added to sterilized units or autoclaved units, so that when you add those in that medium, those things that are attached to those sugars will most likely be rendered benign and won't be competition for your mycelium. In nature, we don't care that our mycelium that we put out there is in competition, because your mycelium that you're inoculating needs to become naturalized by its environment and actually live in harmony with everything that's around it. We're trying to grow a fast mycelia that actually can fully dominate the said environment so that we can get relatively quick sources of mushrooms to be popping. And after the great thing about becoming a mushroom farmer is that you actually have mycelium at your constant disposal. You can constantly be adding those to your outdoor environment. So I have lots of times that I have blocks of wood chips or straw that I've inoculated. Thank you, sir. I have straw that is inoculated that I don't think is going to fruit anymore. But I'm always surprised that I'll take that outside and I'll just put it on the ground, and within a couple days it will fruit again. Because the mycelia is now searching for new nutrient loads, and it actually throws out its mushroom so that it can continue to jump from one spot to the said next. So we have a pasteurized unit. We have chipped straw. There's all sorts of straw that you can get. Here's your stick. You can get oat straw, you can get wheat straw, you can get rice straw, you can get rye straw, but it all depends upon what part of the country you're in. Here in the Northeast, we oftentimes get oat or we get rye straw. And they're either generally from Peach Blow Farms down in Claremont, New Hampshire. There's quite a bit of straw up in Quebec. I'm not sure about anyone that's growing local straw around here. But I'm always encouraging people to grow straw because it's one of those. It's generally weed-free for the most part. It's very cellularly available material for your garden. It breaks down quite quickly, and it doesn't come with a lot of weeds. And it seems to be a really, really hot commodity in all the garden shops right now. And they're having a tough time keeping straw in inventory because it really goes out quite fast. And when I first started doing stuff with mushrooms, straw was going for $5 a bale. Now it's like 10. So it's pretty expensive. So that's why I say there should be more people growing straw so we can get the price to come down some. Yes?
If you're pasteurizing, why does it need to be weed-free? So why not hay?
Well, hay, molecularly, cellularly it collapses when the heat hits it. So it collapses, and then when it actually gets lumped together, it tends to create thermogenesis. It tends to create some heat, and that thermogenesis oftentimes can be a byproduct of bringing out mold and bacteria. Hay does work, but you really need to pasteurize it longer than, say, the pasteurizing that we do with straw. And unless you're using weed mulch straw in your garden, anytime you bring in hay, you're bringing in a lot of grasses, a lot of weeds. Hay doesn't work quite as well as straw. People tend to get some mold infestation when they use grass. It's kind of like oftentimes when you take a bale of hay and a bale of straw next to them together and you leave them on the ground. Within a month, you start to turn over the hay and there's mold all underneath it. And then you turn over the the straw, and you see lots of mycelium, but not quite as much mold. I don't know. I haven't tried a lot of hay because everyone I know that has tried hay generally says it hasn't worked that great. I do know some folks that have used salt marsh hay that they've rinsed and then pasteurized, and they said they had some great luck with salt marsh hay. But then if you look at salt marsh hay, it's actually not a grass, it's a rush, and it's round. It's very hollow inside. So there's a lot to actually. Mycelia loves to grow into cellular voids, and mycelia actually eats from the outside in. So it likes to go into these cellular voids and secrete enzymes and acids that it will actually pull into its mycelial mass. And when the time is right, mycelia will bundle and throw out a physical said mushroom. So we have straw that has been chipped. You don't necessarily have to chip it, but if you chip it, the mushrooms will grow a little faster. So everyone come gather around here, and we can see what chopped straw looks like. You can touch it, feel it, check it out. And once you touch it, you can take it and help me fill up the thing.
Oh.
So there's all sorts of ways to pasteurize straw. If you're really fancy, you can actually get a restaurant steaming unit and steam straw that way. In this case, we can go a little bit old tech, and we can bring a 55-gallon drum of water to a boil, and then pasteurize our medium. My first batches of inoculated straw were with just a lobster crock pot. And I did like 3 or 4 bags, and that was it. And that was fine. I was experimenting. And if you don't have a big thing like this, I've even heard of people taking garbage cans that are galvanized with stainless steel. Oh, we want to fill this up and pack it. We got a lot of bags of inoculum to make. Let's do the best thing. Oh, we tried. Just experimenting.
It's working.
What's the difference between straw?
Okay, that's
That's cool.
I'm not buying anything.
That's the secret ingredient.
You guys at DAcres are always mess with me.
You said you were a witch.
There's a beer.
Somebody's been traveling.
Who's in there? Green. It's people.
Somebody's place.
So, straw is a cereal grain generally. Hay is generally a grass of sorts, something like that. So I tended to in the last few years to actually like these coffee ground satchels. They work really good. Water fills up in here. I can pasteurize my unit. And I can generally put 2 full coffee bag units in a vessel, and then I can get it out a lot easier than saying building a big wire mesh sack that I stuffed really, really full, that half the time when I was doing it in the past, as I was winching it up, the metal strapping would snap and it would splash, and I would get smoldering, burning lime hot bubbling liquid on my arm, and I'd go screaming and running, This way, it's not too bad. I sometimes still get a little scalded, but generally I try to be very careful.
It's going to watch the overflow, right?
That's right. Got to watch the overflow. And because I'm not trying to get one full thing in at one time, I'm slowly immersing it in there so I can kind of regulate how I put it in. And I have a lot greater success with getting this puppy out. And I love to come to DAcres where they have this beautiful proud point where I can just winch it up. Last weekend at my mushroom course, I took a ladder, another ladder, and then a big long stick, and I did the Sir Charles Atlas method that I used a lever. And it worked great too. There was not a lot of strain, but there's not a lot of strain with this. This works out perfectly. So if you have this ability to center it right there, works great. But you don't, like I said, you don't have to use a 55-gallon drum. You can go down. They have all sorts of different size drums that you can get. But a 55-gallon drum seems to work really great for these vats of straw like this. And so I just take this, and I can, on an average, use one of these, 6 or 7 times before it starts to, the burlap gets weakened by the heat, and it just kind of, eventually peters out. And when I start to see this ripping, then I know that my burlap is shot. And then I could actually use my burlap sack then as an agent for doing sheet mulching. So I like to pack it right down, get as much in there as I can. That's a pretty good load in there. I got some little cones in there as well. And then I just kind of take this. I took a temperature reading of this before. I want it to get up to be, say, 160, 180 degrees. I don't really want to go up to 180, 200, because once we go above 180, there are actually bacterium that actually like that hotter temperature. So we like to be at about 160, 180 degrees, and we'll put this in there, and we'll let it sit there for, say, 45 minutes to an hour. You want to push it down a little bit? Let's do another one. You have a little small step ladder? So someone wants to hold this one.
6 foot or smaller?
Oh, just tall enough so that Steve can get a little bit above it and put down a little more force on it. Oh, that would be perfect.
Steve's got to stand here for 45 minutes?
He does, yes.
Apparently offended Dave last time.
Are we going to find the other leg in here?
No, we chipped the legs. We'll find a couple of fingers.
What's this like? Fargo?
Fargo. Depending upon what type of grains they are. There's grasses, sedges, rushes. There's a bunch of different...
Sedges have edges, rushes that look like grass.
Sedges have edges. Yeah. That's probably pretty good right there.
The grass has joints.
Yep.
Grass like joints.
Yeah. So corn's a grass. Bamboo's grass.
This is going to seem like a silly question, but
Why not heat up less water?
Oh,
Why not what?
why not heat up less water?
This is all coming out anyway.
Well, I could have. But sometimes I have
You guys
given
wouldn't got to put
too
that.
little water. Okay? And it's better to get it saturated and overfilling, because if I want to do this 3 or 4 times, which if I'm a mushroom farmer, I want to do this a bunch of times. I can get 3 boiling vats from a filled vessel, as opposed to filling it up a bit, letting it come to a boil, and then having to keep on refilling it that way.
Steve has to sit on it.
Let's put some. Let's put some logs on it.
Just be very aware of it.
There we go. Perfecto.
Voila! So water's come to a boil, and I can actually slow it down now. I don't have to have it be as hot because I don't want it to go really above 180 degrees in there. Okay. So now we just sit around for 45 minutes and make small talk. No, we're going to keep working. Okay, so this is straw. It's in the process of being pasteurized now, and we're just going to kind of sit there and wait. But since we're farmers, we get busy time on a farm, we got stuff to do. Why don't we next inoculate, say, a log and/or stump? How's that sound? Okay, great. So if we want to actually inoculate logs and/or stumps, like I said before, do we want to find the oldest, gnarliest wood that we can actually find? No, because
it's rotted already. It's inoculated.
It's already inoculated. If there's 3,500 different species of mushrooms, that means there's a lot of spores out there. And at any given time, there can be as many as 1 million spores broadcast from one single mushroom. One sporulation. It could be like a million spores. So that is a lot of mushroom spores. So we can actually use logs and/or stumps to actually inoculate. We want them to be relatively freshly cut. Freshly cut as in anywhere from 2 weeks to 3-4 months old. Once we start going beyond 3-4 months, there is a really good chance that there's been many species of mushrooms that have sporulated, and there's a chance that what we have here is already inoculated. And it's always good when cutting things down, we want to analyze the wood and make sure this thing is not all filled with spalting and mycelium already. So if we've actually have something that is got a bit of mycelium in it already, this would be a candidate to do, say, the spore bath inoculation on, as opposed to using nice mushroom plugs that we may have made or bought from somebody to inoculate. So we want to generally, if we use stumps, we can use any size. But realize, because mushrooms are creatures of limits and limitations of nutrient loads, the bigger the stump, the longer it's going to be before we get an initial fruiting, because there's lots and lots of nutrients. And the nutrient load of a stump is not right just here, but if we had a tree of this size, its root zone could be 20 feet out and around. So that is actually all nutrient zone that the mushroom could actually grow up and into. So when inoculating stumps, I like to actually use relatively fresh cut logs or stumps like I was saying, and if I know I'm going to grow mushrooms, I'll actually keep my stumps tall. Why cut them down low in the ground where I'm bending down and I'm cutting? I can actually feel quite comfortable with a chainsaw at this height because it's directly up and about me, and I can really watch where it's falling at this height as well. It's a little bit safer as opposed to trying to cut really low. And I oftentimes will always girdle my stumps. And by girdling, I mean by taking a chainsaw, and I'll step aside with this. Right here. And this actually has myco-infused bar and chain oil in it. It's mushroom spores that have been infused into this bar and chain oil. And this is a natural bar and chain oil. It's basically rapeseed oil.
You're not kidding.
Yeah, no, I'm not
I
kidding.
thought you were pulling our legs.
No. Actually, this was originally invented, and the great thing about it is the mushroom industry is kind of patent crazy. And this was a patent pending thing by Paul Stamets, but they're not selling it anymore, and the patent's still pending. So I called Fungi Perfecti and asked them, can someone make this bar and chain oil on their own? And the gentleman on the phone told me he thinks they could because the patent is pending and it has been patented, and they're actually not even selling it right now. So this would be a great avenue for someone who was clever to actually create like local strains of myco-infused bar and chain oil. And I have actually found that bar and chain oil that actually that runs through a chainsaw that is non-petroleum works wonderfully. I find it actually works better in some cases than the petroleum stuff does. Now, the only thing you have to be careful of is that you have to tweak the formula a little bit in the wintertime and make sure you're not using extremely viscous oils. Some of the vegetable oils aren't quite as viscous as others. And a regular straight vegetable oil in your chainsaw in the wintertime can tend to gum up. So I'll cut my tree down. I'll have a nice little stump here, and then I will hopefully the chainsaw starts. That's always a good one. Okay, so this is a nice little cookie. It's a tree cookie right here. I love to take tree cookies and scatter them throughout the garden and inoculate underneath the tree cookie. And it will just be a slow release of nutrients. And on starry nights like Friday night when the full moon is out, you'll see gnomes on top. It's really kind of fun. Just don't mess with them. But no, this is a nice way to actually preserve a stump for inoculation purposes. I actually make rope spawn. This is spawn that I've inoculated jute or sisal or hemp rope with. And I then put the rope in the girdle right here. And why do I girdle? I girdle because most stumps will stump sprout. And if something is stump sprouting, it's actually pulsing antifungal properties through the wood, so it's in competition with the mycelium that we've actually put in it. So if I don't want stump sprouting to come up, and I don't want lots of trees to be coming up from that stump, I girdle it, and in my case, I put in the rope spawn so that I have inoculated the very bottom of the stump. Say I don't have rope spawn, I could actually push in little mushroom plugs right into here. I could actually take inoculated wood chips right here, and I could actually just kind of push it into here, right here. Just kind of use something like this, and I could just kind of push it right in. I don't care if a little bit of wood chips get around the base, that's fine. I can just kind of push in the wood chips right into around here. I don't have to do anything. I could take my spore bath inoculum and throw it at it, or I could just leave it, and just leave the girdle as a girdle.
The salt oil that you used didn't inoculate like that?
Well, it has as well, but not everyone has micro-infused bar and chain oil.
Really?
So if you did have it, you could certainly use that, and essentially you've already inoculated it. But probably best to actually use those chips that have flown out of your chainsaw to push back into those spots, because that's where most of the liquid is. Okay, so I actually have a stump here, and that's a good inoculation on the bottom, but I want to make sure that I've had a good inoculation. This is a stump in the ground. I guess you could inoculate a stump that's been yanked out of the ground, but you'd want that stump to be really in contact with the ground. You'd want to be able to actually allow the natural capillary action of the stump and the wood to be wicking up. I wouldn't want to suspend a stump from a tree and inoculate it and think that I'm going to get a good mushroom flush. Everything associated with mushrooms needs to be associated with moisture. You don't get great mushroom fruitings unless you've had some moisture, because mushrooms, like people, are 90 to 95% liquid, and they need to actually have that liquid pulsing in them to actually get a good fruiting of something.
But you actually have the question is, this is still a piece of wood that's attached to the roots.
Yes,
But then you can also do it and just like it right?
correct. That's called the totem method. Yeah, you can actually stack them up. And this is going to show you kind of both ways of it. In this case, this isn't really a stump on the ground. We're kind of doing the totem. With the totem, you wouldn't need to make a girdle. But if you had rope spawn, you certainly could forego the actual cutting, and you could do a bunch of girdles, and then just put the rope in and around it that way. So with our stump inoculation method, say we have some plugs that we've been doing some mushroom log plugging with. I can actually come out to the outermost cambium layer, and in a tree, the outermost cambium layer is the realm where liquid and sugars are being transpired up and throughout the tree. And that's where most of the sugars are. It's better to inoculate the outside where the sugars are opposed to in the middle, which is basically in a tree, the middle is for strength, for holding the tree up. But for the most part, there's not a lot of life force energy pulsing through the inner part of a tree. It's in the outside. And you oftentimes can find old trees that virtually have nothing left inside of it, but yet they have a continuously growing outside cambium layer that still is there. You could actually see hollow right up in there and still see leaves popping off that tree. So in this case, I've got some plugs, and since I'm going to inoculate the very surface of the tree. I use plugs that are 5/16. They're a little cheaper than bigger ones, and they're a little more rugged than smaller ones. And because they're kind of a standard size plug by the furniture industry, it's a pretty easy plug to find. And since I make them, I often use those.
What happened to that other job that you had that would
What?
zoom on the...
Don't show
Okay.
them yet.
I got the electric cord. I was all excited. Oh, geez.
Oh, actually, this year I have a cordless version of it now.
Oh, never
So I didn't
mind.
even
Never mind.
need to have you do that one yet.
I've already seen this movie.
You've seen the show.
Every time it's better.
Yeah, it is. It's a new element.
Okay, so I have plugs here from the elm oyster mushroom, right there. And this is all mycelial bundling. You can actually see this is all primordia mushroom. You certainly could put that on the stump as well. This is active mycelium. What a better thing to just put right on the stump immediately. So you can pass that around. So I could take these mushroom plugs, pound these. Right into here.
Dave, at this point, we don't need to worry about cleanliness and heavy.
You are now outside. You can be as dirty as you want to be. But the thing is this mycelium now has been grown in a clean environment so that I can sell it to somebody or grow out fast mushrooms. I can't successfully grow spawn for people that's filled with mold. Even though in some cases, some mushroom farms actually will throw a little bit of mold in with their stuff right before they go to send it outside. So they actually want the mycelia to be starting to naturalize itself very quickly. But I've always found just as long as you put the clean mycelium outside, it acclimatizes itself very nicely to the environment that's out there. And it works just fine as long as it's relatively a good spawn that it's not too old. There is a lifespan how long this mycelium will last in the bag because everything on Earth that eats also creates a byproduct, which in this case is of the mycelia is an acid and an enzyme. And over time, you can actually see the acids and enzymes build up in a bag. And over time, it will build up to the point that it was covering the whole bag. And essentially, the mycelium will be living in its own feces. And eventually, it will suffocate. It won't be able to make it. And or the other thing that can happen if you leave mycelia in a bag too long like this is that it eats up all the nutrients in the plug. And the plugs become like these little soft things. And you're unable to plug them in. I have, though, in turn, still been able to use them by using a little tiny bit bigger dowel hole. So like, if this is 5/16, we could use a 3/8 and just kind of push it in. Okay, so that essentially is an inoculated stump. This is the outer cambium layer right here. Okay, and now that is inoculated. Some books and some people are saying, well, then you now take a plastic bag and put it over the top of it. Well, that's pretty unsightly in the woods to see all your trees with plastic bags or paper bags on top of it. So that's why I was like, well, why don't we just make a cookie and put it on top? Because that kind of locks in the moisture. And for the most part, within a month or two, it will be almost impossible for you to pull this off. The mycelium fuses itself to itself. Just like if you see this bag right here, it's kind of hard to break this up. So it creates fusation. I probably just made up that word.
Great word.
But I like it. I like it, fusation. I make up words all the time, it seems. But I'll actually take it, put it down, and then I'll put the cookie on top, and I'll just leave it. This is the best benign neglect. You don't do anything, you just wait for it to fruit, and nothing will fruit longer than a stump. Because a stump can be big, it's dense, and there's as much nutrients in it as there is in the ground. So it can be many, many, many years of fruiting. And people have known of stumps to fruit hen of the woods for like 50 years. So it's a really great candidate to do agroforestry with.
Will it fruit out to the side? Or
it will fruit from these zones. It will fruit from here. It will fruit from here. And in case of the hen of the woods, it will fruit at the line of where the earth and the tree come together, right in that zone, right there. Okay.
Does it matter what the environment around is?
Well, you would probably prefer it to be more of a shady environment, and you have to realize that if you do this right out in the middle of the full sun, the mushrooms are going to fruit in the shade side.
Okay.
I've been working on a farm down in Roxbury, and they did a ton of inoculations of stumps right on the side of the roads. And they asked me, well, this will work. And I said, well, it will work, but you're not going to get giant flushes because this stump is constantly in the process of being filled with moisture and drying out because it's in the middle of the full sun.
What about other things like pine needles versus a less tannic environment or something?
Doing pine trees?
Well, no, but the environment around it, does it matter that there's...
Oh, you can, as long as you're using a hardwood, you can do it in any environment. You'd rather it be in a little bit more of a shaded environment if you're growing saprophytical mushrooms like the lion's mane, the oysters, the shiitake, the hen of the woods, any of those. They're really speckled light species. There are species of mushrooms out there that are heliotropic, but there's not a lot of heliotropic mushrooms that are good to grow, that are great to eat. Yeah.
I was told to strip the bark, to plant, throughout the top, and then throughout the side.
To strip the bark?
Yeah.
No. Well,
Not the cambium.
if I
just
strip
the bark. The
if I
cambium
strip
I
the
left.
bark,
The cambium I left.
if I strip the bark, I am losing the stump's ability to hold its moisture content in. And anytime the wind blows, convection, drying,
Even for a log that's dead, does that matter?
you never want to strip the bark. Let Mother Nature
I don't
strip
know why
it.
I was told of that.
I don't know either.
Is it going
but-
to mean I'm not going to be fruitful?
I don't know.
Yeah,
This
we'll see.
is all a big
All
experiment.
experiment.
You know,
I don't know why
gardening
they
is
said that.
gardening is that way. I've never heard that.
Yeah.
I've always heard not to ever strip
Yeah,
the bark.
yeah, yeah.
And if you're using stumps and or logs, I've always been told that you just don't want trees that have been completely dragged and half the bark's removed, because those are places of drying out, and those are all also a place where the wind blows, bacteria, molds, other fungus will blow onto that nice, fresh opening cavity. Bark is really a defense mechanism to keep things out and to keep things in, like moisture.
For a living tree, I understood that.
Yep.
I sure hope that it works, because that was a lot of work that I did.
Well, I think it works too. I hope it works too.
How about I've read about covering the plugs then with like a beeswax?
When you're doing say logs, I find that successful. But with stumps, sometimes there's so much subsurface moisture in there that you put the wax on, it forms on the very surface, and then it blows off because it just can't bind itself. I think this is just great. And say I don't have plugs, I've got my micro-infused bar and chain here with a bunch of little wood chips here. I'll just put the wood chips on instead of, say, the plugs. And I'll just spread them all over the top. Say I have fresh chips, and I don't have any inoculum, but I have my love bucket. I could just pour that on top, and then put that on top. Say I wanted to get a little bit more clever, and I didn't have, say, plugs, but I did have my fancy chainsaw. I could push the plugs right into these grooves. You just do that. Say I didn't have plugs, say I had wood chips. I could just push those right in, just like that. Say I didn't have wood chips and I had my love bucket, I could pour that right in and that would go right in. But still, always at the end, oh, and I have these nice fresh mushrooms too. I'll throw all those on there too. Because they're spores. Those are mushroom spores, so those are getting in there as well. So then, at the end, I always put a cap on. And you can get really clever, and then you can start making mushroom statues on logs in the woods. You can inoculate your statues, so you can have a mushroom statue that's growing mushrooms, which is really pretty cool. But say you like whales. Maybe you could do a whale that's inoculated too. Necessity is the mother of invention. So here we go. Inoculated stump. Very nice. Okay. Yes.
Quick question: if you might have put several different kinds of spores, should you mix and match your spores, or should you go for?
In nature, yes. In your lab, no.
Yeah.
Yeah. In nature, it's going to be inoculated by something else as well. If I do a good inoculation, most likely my mycelium is going to dominate it because it's living mycelia that's been added to this matrix. Mushroom spores are going to also come and land on this and inoculate it as well. But if my mycelium becomes dominant, my mushroom is going to come first and will probably fruit the longest. And then you'll have tertiary, secondary decomposers that will come in and actually key in on the nutrients that the other mushroom has discarded as unusable. And there's some mushroom farms that are actually taking mushroom logs, growing them out, and then chipping the mushroom logs, and then taking the wood chip medium, sterilizing it, and then adding a lower grade secondary decomposer so that it actually can eat the nutrients that, say, the shiitake ate, but there's still more. You know, the oysters can generally go farther than, say, the shiitakes, say, can. Yeah. So, okay, so say we, yes, ma'am.
So, does it matter what the diameter of the stump is?
The smaller it is, the quicker you'll get fruiting. The shorter amount of time you'll get fruiting. The bigger it is, the longer time it's going to get your initial fruiting, but the longer amount of time you'll actually get fruitings from it.
And then, if it's taller, could you do multiple girdling? Or?
Sure. Yeah, like I said, you could girdle a bunch of times around if you wanted. But I tend to think that the more you keep the bark intact, the more mycelium is going to be pulsing through it, and the more moisture you actually have inside the, say, stump, and you actually get the navigation of the fluids that are gaining up and down through capillary action like stumps often do. You don't get the dry rotting that can sometimes take place with stumps that are denuded of their you know. The micro-infused bar and chain oil was initially created for the logging industry in the Pacific Northwest, where they actually do a lot of clear cutting. And what ended up happening in a lot of these clear cuts is that the mycelium would never get a chance to get a foothold because it was such a high elevation and the sun's so intense that the sun was baking these stumps and they were essentially dry rotting, not really rotting at all. They become almost like petrification. So Stamets was like, well, if we can figure out a way to get the logging industry to be using a bar and chain oil that has mushroom spores in it, when they're cutting, they're inoculating, and once something's creating mushroom spores, it actually creates mycelium, and mycelium actually will uptake and hold into moisture. And the more mycelium you have in the soil, generally the more upload of nutrients and moisture you can actually get to go into your plants. So the mycelium acts as like a sucker and a decomposer, and they found that once they actually were able to inoculate these stumps, the whole Gaia life cycle was taking place. You'd get mushrooms coming up, you'd get moss coming in, you'd get insects feeding on the mushrooms and the moss and the other things, and it would just be a constant state of decomposition. And when decomposition happens, forests can successfully come back again. And the whole process of forest is a constant living, dying, living, dying, living, dying. And that living, dying leads to thicker and thicker and thicker soils. And these clear-cut forests where everything's been taken away, including the tops, including everything, you've just now killed this forest's ability to ever create nutrients again for, who knows, maybe 100 years. And they say, what do they say? For every 100 years, the earth makes about an inch of soil. It's not a lot. It might even be 1,000 years. So a big open space with no trees on it anymore is not going to be building soil very fast. For some reason, they just weren't. Stamets has said that they just weren't selling enough of it because they like to do a lot of volume. So they weren't putting out a lot of volume of it as they wanted to.
They weren't, or the logging companies couldn't get enough of it from
The logging companies just weren't buying it. They weren't buying it enough of it. Yeah. I was buying it every year. I was buying like 15, 16 bottles of it and selling it to people, and I've had people that had great success. And I was real bummed out when I called them, and they actually gave me a couple bottles because they're like, oh, we have some more on the shelves here, and I was like, can I get those? And that's when I started asking lots of questions, and I kept on calling back, and they were like, this is getting fishy, and I was like, well, I'm not fishy. I'm asking you. It's like, I have a product that you guys told me to sell, and now I'm selling it, and now it's not being made. Can I work with somebody to make this stuff? And he said, well, the patent was pending, but we're not doing it. We're not trying to get it patented now, so I think we can make it.
Get it in writing.
Get it in writing.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, that's the key.
Good point.
So now we want to do, like, say, logs as opposed to stumps. And logs, if we use stuff that's, say, 4 to 14 inches in diameter, has more sapwood than it does to heartwood. So logs, fruit much faster than, say, big stumps do. A big stump could take 2 to 3 years to fruit, where a 4-inch log, most likely within a year's time, you'll get a fruiting of said mushrooms from.
And do you advocate only, maybe you just said this, but only like just not drilling into the bark, just on the.
Well, with logs, because logs are going to be sitting on the ground and they're going to be stood up, they're going to be dunking or not being dunked. I want to try to colonize those logs kind of as fast as possible, as opposed to the stump that's just going to sit there forever. A log can actually be a production item. You can actually have 300,000 logs and have a constant rotation of mushrooms coming from your logs upon your dunking of them. And in the realm of growing mushrooms on logs, there is two basic formalities. One is considered to be benign neglect, or laissez-faire. You just kind of inoculate the log, and then you stand it either horizontally or vertically in the ground, and you just let Mother Nature fruit it. If you want to be more of a production mushroom farm, you'll do the forced fruiting approach. And the forced fruiting approach is to take a log, inoculate it, let there be a spawn run, and the spawn run means to take the log, put it out into the woods, on the backside of a house that's really quite shaded, underneath the drip line of a roof, and have it be off the ground by just a little bit for like 6 to 9 months. And at the end of that time, you can then do a forced fruiting. And a forced fruiting is basically you're filling the log with moisture. When you fill the log with moisture, the mycelium thinks it's in an emergency and that it has to do something, because this may be it. This may be the only chance I ever have to actually throw out my fruiting bodies before the great flood takes us all under and there's no chance of me getting a reproductive health. So I actually take my log, and then I dunk it for 24 hours, and then I take it out, and the Chinese and Japanese culture then strike the log, and that awakens the mycelial spirit, they believe. I don't know if it's true. It does seem to work. I've done experiments with not thumping, and I've done experiments with thumping. And it tends to be that the thumping, for some reason, works. I don't know if it's the jarring or the banging or whatever it is. It could be the mycelial spirit. You know, it doesn't like to get hit on the head. It's going to throw out a mushroom and come after you. That's right. There's all these pictures of like ancient shiitake operations with these guys with giant hammers whacking on them. And in Japan, these big giant mushroom operations, they have these special stick with these crazy leather flip-flops that they whack the tops of the logs with afterwards. There's got to be something to it. You know, it's one of those, I don't think anyone could ever know why. You know, unless you talk mushroom. Which I've gotten good at it, but it still doesn't always talk to me. Other things. Like my wife telling me to get inside and playing with the mushrooms. So actually, I like to use logs that are, say, 4 to 14 inches diameter. A, because the sapwood is, there's more sapwood to heartwood. And B, a 4 to 14 inch diameter log is a heck of a lot lighter than a 20-inch log that I'm going to be handling and dunking and doing all sorts of other stuff with. And it would take this longer to fruit than, say, a small, log. I want to use logs, if I can, that are cut in the time of the year where the sap is primarily inside the log. And those times are the fall, the winter, and the spring. Those are the best times in New England to get your logs, because the sap is not out in the leaf canopy. It is inside the tree or the root structure. So that means that most of the sugars are in the wood as opposed to the sugars being up in the leaf. And in the wintertime, because all the sugars are here, the tree is holding on to the bark, and it holds it really tight. Bark stays on wood longer that has been cut in the wintertime versus in the spring. So I take my logs. I want them to be relatively clean. I want to make sure there's not all sorts of mycelium growing throughout them in them. If there are, I might do another approach like benign neglect, or I might do log grafting, which we can talk about a little bit. Or I might take spore bath inoculum and put them on them and just let Mother Nature do what it wants. Maybe I'm just trying to break it down. But if I'm actually wanting to get, somewhat of a quick crop, I'll actually take plugs and I will make a series of holes. About an inch or two apart. And I generally like to do a diamond pattern, and it just allows me not to have to use quite as many plugs. And so it'll be like a diamond like this, and then my next layer I'll come over and do the upper part. And I'm just trying to get the mycelium to grow throughout this said log. Would anyone like to come and try to plug it? I'll do it then.
Bam.
I just went away with Mom.
Oh, shucks. Hey, get up there, bud.
I did this last year, and I didn't get anything yet, but you're telling me to be patient, right?
Be patient, and if you haven't dunked it, dunk your log.
Okay.
Yep.
There you go.
There we go.
And if you're not dunking, it's better for you to do benign neglect, and just put it in the woods, right there.
Right there. Oh, there we go.
So you can see why with a log, it's good to do your inoculum, drill your holes. I'll do more. To drill your holes and then to plug them, because with bark and with wood chips, you oftentimes can't tell where the holes are anymore. So I'll do a certain particular area, plug it, and then move on. So we're going to shift it, and so there are drills, and then there are drills.
Oh, here we go. Is this what we're waiting for?
And this is a converted angle grinder, and this is a specialty chuck that has been created that actually sits on top of an angle grinder. And this is a common angle grinder that you can get for buffing steel or rust or doing cars or stuff, but it actually has a converter with a chuck on it. This is not patented, and it is unpatentable because it is something that is a part and piece for conversions. This isn't a patented item. This thing is. This is a specialty bit that was created by the Japanese shiitake growing industry. So a machine shop can make these for you, and right now I'm in the works of having a couple of machinists make some for me so I can sell them at workshops, because the closest place you can find any of these are either Field and Forest out in Wisconsin or they're in Washington State. Washington State Mycological Growing Association. You can get them from them. This generally costs $35. This is about $12. And watch this.
That's the stuff.
When I do big workshops, I let everybody struggle for a bit, and I let everybody use the drill, and generally I let their battery run down, and then I'll just kind of willy-nilly come out and be like this. And they'll be like, "Oh my, what is that thing?" And I'll be like, "This is the secret weapon." But it works great. I mean, and for a little while, I had never seen one, and I had never tried one. And actually, I taught a course up here, and I still hadn't tried it yet. And we drilled, and people were like, "Oh, this drilling's hard." Well, it is kind of hard. And that's why if you are drilling, you don't want to use a wood bit. You don't want to use a spade bit. You want to use a brad point bit, and these brad point bits are bits that are doweling bits. So they go in and they come out relatively easy. When and if you get this little device, if you had the ability to get one corded, you think this was fast. This spins at about 6 RPM, 6,000. The corded one spins at 10. You can take a log and drill the whole thing out in 2 minutes flat, no problem. Where a lot of times, a log with a drill will take close to 20 minutes. So if you're looking for production, this is the way to go. It is really fast. So you can plug a couple of those right in there. And these are only inch dowels, and most cambium layers are an inch or a little bit bigger. So we are doweling the full inch of the cambium layer. We don't need to go deeper, and you do realize if you go deeper, you're going into harder wood, and that harder wood just does not have a lot of sugars in it. This is an awesome device, but the downside of it is, and I'm not quite sure exactly why, and someone can enlighten me on why. If I actually try to take this and try to go into the grain side of it, pull the back end of that stump. It's a lot harder. It's got to do something with the shaft, the way that's cut, and the way that is. And you do also have to remember that this bit has to be spinning at full RPM before you even attempt to try to put it into. If you go up to it and turn it on, it will suck in and jam, and you won't ever be able to get that puppy out. And you'll be sad. Because you'll be watching your friends inoculating around you, and you'll be sitting there with a vice grip trying to pull it out. And I learned that from a class where actually I had just got this. I did a bunch of logs, and one of the gentlemen was like, well, can I give it a try? And I said, well, just make sure that you're bringing it up to speed. And what did he do? He put it here, and he seized it up. And as I was trying to back it out with a vice grip, it snapped. So it made me sad. But you live and learn, you know. And so now I always tell people, if you have these, bring it up to speed. And bringing it up to speed when you have a battery pack means that you're beginning to wear down the battery, and you're not going to get as long of a. These puppies are actually now being also sold to maple syrup producers. Because you go up to a tree in the woods and boom, I mean, it's like, I've had a couple of maple syrup producers come to my workshops and they're like, I can't believe how fast that goes in. That is absolutely amazing. So these work really great. Just realize that once it's going, you've got to get it going full speed to get it in. And because it is spinning at such a high velocity, if you're not paying attention and you let that thing start to go, it will spin around and maybe break your arm. So a lot of times, they actually make these things with they make these things with side chucks that you can actually put a little chuck in this little hole right here, and that will actually give you the ability to be able to hold it and it won't spin on you that way. Okay, so once I inoculate, I want to think to myself, am I going to go benign neglect with this method, or am I going to go forced fruiting with this method? If I'm going to go benign neglect, I'm going to take my log and either put it right in the ground, either horizontally or vertically, but it's best to let there be a natural spawn run that happens so the mycelium becomes somewhat the dominant organism in there. I'll still take my log and put it off the ground, say on a pallet or on a couple of rocks or on a couple nice freshly cut logs, and I'll stack them log cabin style and let them sit there for 6 to 9 months. And at that time, I'll do the forced fruiting. But I also want to think to myself, if I'm going to do the benign neglect method, and I'm going to be putting that thing into the ground, this is not the type of thing that I need to necessarily do my waxing with. Generally, if you're doing logs, because you're trying to keep in as much moisture as you can, we put little tiny dabs of cheese wax, beeswax, soy wax over the inoculation points. And that wax actually, for the first year or two, really traps all the moisture inside and prevents there being a lot of other bacteria, microorganisms, and other stuff moving in through those nice inoculation points. There's a whole other component of this industry that actually is moving away from doing plugs and is actually moving towards these palm inoculators. And you actually can take these inoculators, pop them in sawdust, and then go up to inoculation points and do this. It's cool, but it hurts. And it's kind of, to me, it's kind of a pain to do this, come with this, and then whack it. And it's like, I did this for a day, and I had this big black and blue at the end. I'm a carpenter, and I can plug all day long because you use your hand to be a lever, and if you're just doing this, you're not using a lot of muscles. People who first start carpentry for the first time do this with a hammer, like this. And you're like, man, you're going to be getting tired. And you watch people when they're upside down, they're like, but really it's a lever, and you just want to use it, use the weight, and you can plug. It's like, I don't even have to, I can get so good that I can just be, it's like music. But, it works really great. Their belief is with the wood chip spawn that because it's a little bit more saturated into all the points of the small bits of the wood chips, that you might get a little tiny bit faster inoculation with wood chip spawn versus plug spawn. But my take on the reverse side is that those wood chips eventually fall out. And you get bugs that will go in and mine out the wood chips. And I seem to find that all the logs that I have inoculated with sawdust spawn, they don't last as long as, say, logs that are plugged. The plug seems to stay in there for quite a long time. Eventually they'll get eaten and they'll kind of fall out. But it seems to be like 6-7 years down the line. Versus the wood chip spawn seems to be, the logs only seem to last about 3 or 4 years. Versus a oak log could last as much as 10 or 12 years. So if I'm doing if I'm planning on doing the benign neglect method, where I bury my logs a quarter of the way vertically or horizontally, I don't necessarily have to worry about waxing, because that wood is going to be in contact with the ground, and you'll have the natural capillary reaction of the wood wicking up the moisture into the, say, wood. If I'm going to do the benign neglect method, I'm going to actually not care about the waxing in that respect. Because it's going to be out in Mother Nature, it's going to have to compete with all the other microorganisms. If I'm going to be doing the forced fruiting method, I'm looking for more production, I'm looking for faster fruitings, and by having trapped in all that moisture, that means that my log is completely dominated, and that it just is going to be a little bit faster for me to get the initial fruitings, and I'll have more mycelia that has been filled with moisture that way. So this is kind of the nuts and bolts on log inoculation. If I actually do the forced fruiting, if I'm doing species like shiitake, lion's mane, oysters, I generally like to stand my logs up horizontally. If I'm doing stuff like hen of the woods or reishi, I actually still will let them lay and be in contact with the ground, because reishi and hen of the woods like that constant moisture load being sucked up into it. And hen does not fruit on the wood. It fruits at the junction of where the wood and the ground come together. It's chicken of the woods that fruits on physical wood. You found that on a log or a stump, right? On a tree. That's right. Chicken of the woods generally doesn't grow on the ground, but there are a couple species of chickens that will actually fruit off of underground stumps. You may not think there's logs there, but they're underneath the ground, like that. And there's all sorts of different methods. You can, in Japan, they do this hillside log stacking method, where they actually use the contour of the hill, and they stack logs as little A-frames against each other, and they use hills to stack them up. But they'll also take logs and build mushroom grow houses, or go behind the backside of a shed, Or they'll just go out in the middle of the forest, and they'll just stand logs up vertically and let them fruit that way. And vertical fruiting is really nice because you can get to all aspects of the log. And in markets that are concerned about looks and how everything has to look particularly really nice, if a mushroom is not touching a log, it's not going to be misformed or misshapen in any way, shape, or form. You'll be getting grade A mushrooms every time, as opposed to things that have little dirt or bark or other things on them. And so the pests to this realm are chipmunks, slugs, and maybe some deer and other things. So when growing mushrooms out in the woods, if you want to help to remedy the slugs, people oftentimes use beer bait traps. If you're worried about chipmunks and deer, they actually make mushroom shade cloth, or you can use remay or shade cloth to try to keep the critters off the said logs and or stumps. I generally just kind of have a lot of logs, so they don't seem to be getting at everything. And I also built my yurt. I have a yurt on our land, and I built it 6.5 feet off the ground, with two closed sides in the back, two open sides in the back, and all closed in the front, so that the sun never hits. But yet I still have air transpiration going on throughout this in an area that's very humid. So I dunk my logs, and then I just go put them underneath my yurt. And my wife and I got married. I had like 15, 20 logs under there, and we harvested like 30 pounds of shiitake mushrooms for our wedding, which is really pretty cool. So your average fruiting from a log could be anywhere from a few mushrooms to 4 or 5 pounds. I mean, I've seen logs that looks like a porcupine is fruiting off of it. There's just so many mushrooms. And on an average, when you are force fruiting logs, you have to realize that there needs to be grow out time of the mycelium in between flushes of fruitings. So if you have a fruiting of mushrooms, you want to wait at least probably 3 weeks before you actually try to fruit it again, because you have to let your mycelium recover and be ready to fruit. Otherwise, you can keep on fruiting, but it's not going to fruit because the mycelium won't have enough nutrients to actually be able to fruit. And it takes the mycelium a lot of energy to make a fruiting. So that's why you want to wait a little bit. So in your average year with benign neglect, you might get 2 fruitings. And your average year with forced fruiting, you could get like 5 or 6. And if you have a mushroom grow house or a greenhouse that is converted to a mushroom grow house, you could actually grow mushrooms throughout the wintertime if you are able to maintain a balance above temperature.
How about basements?
Basements are great as long as you actually can make sure your log stays moist. Yep. And that isn't always great for, say, mushrooms that... the mushroom needs to not mind a little bit more darkness unless you have some light systems in there. Yeah. Oysters seem to be okay with basements. Shiitake seem to be not so good if you don't have some light. And in most of the guidebooks on growing mushrooms, it will actually give you light parameters on what certain particular mushrooms need in those. So any thoughts, questions, ideas?
What about wood types? I mean, you're saying hardwood, but that can be box elder all the way to boxwood. I mean, all the way to something really hard like Osage orange or something. I mean, what are there certain types that grow on certain species, and how do we know that? Like if I were to get a whole bunch of oyster mushrooms and try to put them in a boxwood, would that work? Or try to put them in a...
The harder the hardwood, the better. There's certain type of particular species that really like particular wood more than others. Okay. Oak is one of the best for shiitake. Maple is one of the best for oysters. Okay. They have had luck with both on either or, but they have often found that if you can assimilate what is actually found the closest in nature, then that will be the best thing that will be fruiting on for the longest. But they've also had lots of success with fruiting lots of different mushrooms on lots of different particular hardwoods. The hardwoods that don't seem to be the trickiest are cherry, really antifungal hardwoods like the black locust.
Yeah.
It works, but it takes a long time. And Fruit woods, for some reason, don't seem to be the best. I'm not quite sure why, and no one's been able to put their thumb on it yet, but they don't seem to be the best. In a lot of the guidebooks, it actually will tell you different species and tell you what mushroom particular works best on them. But the softer the hardwood, the faster it breaks down, and the shorter period of times you'll actually have mushroom fruitings. So if you have stuff like birch, our local aspen, some of the poplars, those are soft. You may only get 2-3 years of fruiting. You might get a fruiting starting within 6 months, but you then again, may not have that long of a fruiting on it. And like for example with birches are sometimes hard for the mushrooms to make it through the bark. And the interior wood will often break down before the bark actually does as well. That's why a lot of birches in the woods, you can just tip them over and they'll just fall. And you look inside and it's virtually hollow inside. Yeah.
What works best on the beach?
If it has beech bark disease, definitely inoculate lion's mane into it because it's going to go down relatively quickly. Beech is wonderful for oysters, works great for shiitakes. I've had great luck with the lion's mane. There is a Hepzygis tesselis, which is the white beech. It works good for that. The beech is a softer hardwood, so it doesn't necessarily last as long. Yeah, there's a lot of people that are actually really game on trying to inoculate ashes right now because there's a lot of ashes that they're afraid are going to get the pine borer beetle, so they're cutting them down and inoculating them. It's a softer hardwood, and you really, almost in all aspects of using beech, need to make sure you wax it because beech can be cut and burned wet. So it is a very cellularly open wood, and it's really not that dense. So you want to make sure that it's a relatively moist environment that it's in. Yeah.
So, I'm sorry, did you say it would not be good for wood chips then? Or?
It would be fine for wood chips, because it's on the ground and in contact, so it's a readily available source to wick up moisture and express itself quite quickly as a nutrient load. Yeah.
What about growing on waste paper products?
Sure. You can grow mushrooms on toilet paper. Yeah, I mean, there's a little classic kids experiment that I've done that we actually take a roll of toilet paper, bring water to a boil, take the toilet paper, just literally dunk it in it, pull it out, let it kind of dry off a little bit, and then where the toilet paper roll is, we just sprinkle some hardwood sauce and wood chip spawn of oyster mushrooms inside, and then just kind of cover it with a bucket or a plate or a little plastic bag. And within like 3 to 4 weeks, you'll get mushrooms fruiting from the roll of toilet paper. I met this really interesting permaculturist out of the Stamets courses I went to, and she was a gal who had it's a disease where your joints are always hurting and are tender, and fibromyalgia. And she was looking. She had read that there was a bird called the rhea, which is a South American ostrich, that when people with fibromyalgia actually ate or took the meat as a tincture or a pill, it would actually help their fibromyalgia conditions. So she was trying to figure out how to create a closed-loop system on actually being able to grow rheas and feed them successfully and get as many different products from it as she could. So she learned that gerbils are ravenous bedders and bed makers. They rip and shred and tear wood and or paper. And so she got a connection with her local newspaper that used soy-based ink in their newspaper. And she would take the paper, throw them in with the gerbils. They would bed it, and they would shred it, and they would chop it all up. And then she would take the gerbils and feed them to the rhea. She would then take the ground up, shredded newspaper, she would then pasteurize it and grow oyster mushrooms off the newspaper. So, there you go. Newspaper. Yeah. Yeah, it works great. You just want to make sure there's not a lot of chemicals, dyes, color streams, glues in there.
So if you do use stuff that's kind of random, you don't know what chemical inks have been used or whatnot, the mushrooms will suck all that up.
They will take up, yeah. And in the cases of like lead, they actually will uptake lead into their being. So you do want to be careful with mushrooms. You know, they are kind of the kind of creatures that will actually build upon their environment. You know, there's like certain vegetables you use in the garden, particularly that, like, if you were using manure tea, that you wouldn't want to use on because they could actually have fecal coliform matter inside of them. Probably the same would go for mushrooms. If you have really substrates that you're not really sure of, or in the environment where that it came from, that might not be the best product for you to, say, use. Yeah. Cardboard seems to be a great medium, and the glues that they use it are oftentimes food-grade glues, and they're generally all water-based. So they dissolve quite quickly in the water stream, and a lot of times just evaporate out. I use cardboard as in stem butts. A lot of mushrooms, let's see, I know I had one in here.
Dave has got one over here. That's got one.
Oh, that's a good one, yeah.
In the magic soup over
In the magic soup. Yeah. A lot of mushrooms at their stem butt lines have tons and tons of mycelium that is gathered all around it. And that mycelium is a genetic clone of itself. And because that mycelium is actually the living organism of it, you can literally take a stem butt and either, I could take that stem butt and just transplant it to a place. Or I could literally take a piece. Does anyone have a knife on them? You got one?
Make sure it works good.
I could take, say this was a complete stem butt with mycelium growing off it. I could take it and cut it and then make a bunch of little cuts throughout the stem butt. I could then take cardboard pieces inside a bucket or a place that is somewhat moist. I could then take these cardboard pieces, rip out some of this corrugation, and actually take mycelium and stack it all on top, and then take another little piece of wetted cardboard and put it on top. And I could then stack it up and form something like we can check out over here, a whole matrix of cardboard wood chips, cardboard wood chips, cardboard wood chips that has stem butts that will all throughout it, and the mycelium will spread and they will move all throughout that whole entire cardboard matrix, eat the cardboard, and then will turn the cardboard into just nutrients for your said garden. So the cardboard becomes not only something for the mycelium to eat, it becomes almost like a mycelial lens, where the mycelia on the cardboard will become like a dominant organism on that, say, cardboard, and the cardboard then ends up being an excellent mulching agent and also a great weed barrier. You don't necessarily have to use shade cloth or black plastic or weed barrier, which gets stuck in the soil. Eventually things do grow through it and it will break down some. We can use cardboard, which is a pretty consistent waste stream, and we can just year after year build on top of those areas that we're not growing things, be building our soil, and also be able to use it to help keep down the weeds. Which in New England, the weeds can be pretty ravenous. They can really get out of control on you. And it's a really great way to actually help to, say, build your soil and your nutrient base, and then also keep your weeds down. So you could do just growing mushrooms on straw using the stem butts. Say I didn't have stem butts, and I had some buckets of liquid love, I could broadcast those right on some cardboard that way. Say I have wood chip spawn. I can just take my wood chip spawn and sprinkle them on the cardboard as well. And I think that will actually lead us to. This has probably been going for about 45 minutes, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Easy, fellas. Gentle.
Okay, we'll use our fancy stick. Just lower it down a little bit so we can spill a little bit into here.
Yeah, I got it.
Now, this liquid, the straw tea, is also considered to be a natural herbicide. So you could actually spread it on plants, and it's said to help limit its life, especially if it's hot.
Yeah.
And every time I dump it out, it kind of kills what it's around, but mostly it's because it's hot. But they say the more times you do this, it becomes more liquid tea, and it becomes more of a natural plant killer. It does say that they do say that you can do about 3 to 4 dunkings in the same batch until the load becomes a little bit too tanniny to actually have great success with. That we're going to put in bags that we're going to actually grow these myceliums in a closet, in a basement, in a grow house, in that sort of environment to get a fast colonization. We're not planning, unless we want to take this bag and put it right outside. And like my buddy found out the other day after taking one of my courses, he took his bags and just left them all outside overnight. Well, a little raccoon came in the middle of the night and just shredded the whole bag because it liked the smell of the new stuff. It was food. So take your straw and put it outside once you've had some fruitings of stuff. And then it's really well colonized. I could even take that straw and take 2 bales of straw, soak the bales, and then I could actually take my leftover spawn and sandwich them between the bales, and over time the mycelium will grow through all that soaked straw. You'll get fruitings out the sides of the straw, and then you could then, at the end of the year or next year, take the inoculated straw bales and put them all over your place in your gardens.
So that would be straw that you had not pasteurized.
That's right. And I don't care because I'm outside. It's the indoor environment that doesn't have the same air exchange going on. Here, the wind is always blowing. There's air exchange going on. And everything has to get naturalized to its environment. When growing inside in a greenhouse, even for plants, there's always things that build up that are kind of in competition with your environment that often aren't found to the same degree in Mother Nature. So, in a closed environment, you pasteurize or sterilize. If you're going outside to your gardens, you can go from a pasteurized or a sterilized medium right outdoors into substrate.
Or not even.
Well, yeah, not even pasteurized. I could literally go up to a tree that that was fruiting lots and lots of elm oyster, and I could chip the tree and then inoculate a bunch of wood chips. Could do something like that.
Are you also doing this because you use this as a material for sale?
I don't sell as much pasteurized straw. I'll get orders from people who want me to pasteurize straw from them and sell them this straw. Mostly I do the straw for my own growing of mushrooms, as opposed to, it's harder to lug around vats of straw to sell to people.
Oh yeah, I didn't mean you would sell pasteurized straw. I just meant for the packets, mycelial packets and stuff.
I generally, to sell to people, I do wood chips.
Oh.
Because wood chips go many more directions. It's harder to go backwards with straw. Once I've inoculated straw, I don't want to go to wood chips. I'd rather go to straw. But wood chips can go to straw, wood chips can go to coffee grounds, wood chips can go to other wood chips, cardboard. Straw is kind of esoteric to itself. I don't know if that's the right word to use there.
Particular.
I like it. So I want to take this, and I get this right out of there.
Worked in the medical field before.
And again, because I've worked
worked in medicine, didn't you just invalidate the whole pasteurization process?
Not really, because we've got hot, boiling water that's just come onto here, and we haven't sterilized it. We've pasteurized it.
Okay.
If I was to do this with a bunch of sterilized wood chips, yeah, I would definitely want to make sure that environment is like clean. That's why I do all my sterile mediums right in front of the laminar flow hood. I don't need to do that in straw, because this stuff is so hot, and eventually this stuff, within a 2 or 3 month time, is going to go through three to four fruitings, and then I'm going to move outside with it. And if I do get a little tiny bit of contaminant, I can actually just take a little bit of water and peroxide and mist the mold, and it will kill it. And in some cases, I don't care if there's a little bit of mold, because it's working towards naturalizing itself in its environment. It's just for the purposes of sale of spawn and being in a closed environment that you really want to worry about your contamination loads. Yeah. And plus, I'm doing this, I'm inoculating in it, and we're then going to make holes in it, and you're going to bring it to your house. And I know your house isn't sterile. Nobody's house is. And I would never come and take this afterwards and put it in my refrigerator, because your refrigerator is quite a volatile environment as well. So we actually just pasteurize this, and then we will inoculate it. And it's still pretty hot. A little tiny bit of spawn, and sandwich it in the bag as you fill it up the straw. Or in applications like this, when I have a lot of people, I'll actually just put this whole thing, and we'll all come in, and we'll just kind of mix it up, and we'll kind of stand around it, and then we'll just start putting them in the bag. So if we all just kind of want to gather around the straw pile. And then we just kind of want to scramble, move it, shake it, mutter a few words of witchcraft. This is a love pile. This is a straw love pile. A straw love pile. Yeah. It's nice and warm. It is. Kids love this pie.
Roy's steaming up.
So after you fill these bags, where do they go?
After we fill these bags, we can put them in the bottom of our house in, say, like our basement, in a closet. But we want to have them off the ground a little bit, because it is plastic. At that 2 points of contact with that nice humid environment in there, if we put it on a nice wood floor, what's going to happen? Condensation, and we might get mold, or we might get a rip in the bag, and we might get the mycelium moving in and starting to eat the wood that it's on. What? Well, if you put a paper bag with this in it, what's going to happen? Yeah. Some people are actually taking straw and using plastic Dunkin' Donuts buckets with a bunch of holes in them, and they grow out the sides. I know people who just take this and put them in cardboard boxes. I know people who actually take this and put it inside burlap sacks. But plastic's kind of nice. It's not that great for the purposes of the earth, but you can get biodegradable plastic bags that, once this is cooled down, can be used that way and aren't going to break down that fast.
So would you turn it every once in a while?
So what I do? No, we take them, and you want to be the first demonstration model for us? Okay, keep on filling. Try not to step on it if you can. I know it's tricky. Right there.
This stuff here is just
That's a good stuff right there.
That's really good.
Go.
How long do you think it'll take before these fruit?
Generally, it takes about a month and a half. Not that much time. You'll see the mycelium very active very quickly. So we'll take the bag to be about that full, and then at the end I'll take the air and push it out of it and keep on packing it in so it's nice and tight, just like this. I'll then take and spin it just like this, and then take a nice little knot just like that and close it off. So I've kind of, for the most part, cut off the air in it. Air still is penetrable in it because we haven't sealed it. So what I tend to like to do then is I'll take this, I'll bring it home, I'll put it on a brick in my basement. If I know a place in my house that's kind of humid, that would be the best place to go. And so when I get home, I place it off the ground, or if I have a spot, I can actually use this and hang it. That's kind of nice too. When I get home, I'll decide where I'm going to put it, and then I'll take like 10 holes and just put some holes around it so there's actually breathing that goes on, and the mushroom won't suffocate. And then the mushrooms will then either pop through the holes, or I will see little bundling on the sides of the bag, and then I can pop your little holes in those spots, and the mushrooms will go right through the bundlings. Just like that.
So that's done after it's completely inoculated?
I want to be watching. See what's going on. And if I start to see lots of bundling on the sides, then I'll actually take a mist bottle and mist those locations with water. And that misting will help just give that mushroom more ability to fruit through those particular areas.